This is Robert Margolacci, the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine, and welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech, MindShareTV. I'm honored to have a very special guest this morning with us, Dr. Michael Fullan, on his new book, Spirit Work, Centers Love and Care for Students, Staff, and Communities as the impetus for creating a positive culture while collaboration is the vehicle for manifesting this that spirit of work. Thank you for joining me this morning, Dr. Fullan.
It's great to be back with you, Robert. I look
Yeah,
forward to it.
it has been a while. I recall chatting and having you on our virtual summit a year or so ago. A little bit about Dr. Fullan. He's a recipient of the Order of Canada, who is a worldwide authority on educational reform with a mandate for helping achieve the moral purpose of children learning, a former dean of the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, the University of Toronto. Michael advises policymakers and local leaders around the world to provide leadership in education. He is a best-selling author of numerous books, including the most recent one, The Spirit of Work. What inspired this latest book? You are prolific and an inspiration as I'm writing my book, The Art of Networking in the Digital Age, that should be completed in 2023.
Well, things are, I have a feeling we're going to be talking quite a bit in the next 24 months, Robert. Things are
Absolutely.
heating up, and the way that I come to opportunities, it looks like they're self-generated because I'm coming out, I'm the lead author. But quite often, in the case of the spirit work, somebody that I know well, I've been working with, comes to me and say, I'm noticing certain things and we have to talk about this. Can you take a look at it and see what we want to do? So that was the case here. Mark Edwards, who I think you know, was a former
Yes.
superintendent of Mooresville in Northeast US. And he was also superintendent of the year for the entire, I don't know, 17,000 fold superintendents in the
Amazing.
US 2 or 3 years ago. So Mark is a great guy. In fact, I did a book with him earlier on Mooresville. So he came along, I guess it was a year and a half ago, and said, I'm noticing some school districts that are really, they're really doing something, even though the odds are against them. They're fantastic. There's large, small, medium, and I can name them. And he said, I think there's some story here because this stuff is against the odds, and it's real and it's deep and it's wide. And so I said, let's take a look at it. And he had several districts. We ended up with 7 districts. It was a focus on the U.S. It was the Administrative Association and Mark, who's a big member there. So it was U.S. focused, but there was
Right.
action there. And I'm always glad to go where there's action because it's the bottom up story I want to capture.
Fascinating. And speaking of the human spirit has so much untapped potential in our ingenuity as people, has demonstrated our ability to innovate. However, in education, generally speaking, we seem resistant to change in many ways. Just like the current situation, the labor strife in Ontario, which we'll touch on later, positive results so far that they're still in school. But has the pandemic crisis become a catalyst for this in your mind to sustain change?
Well, it turns out, yes. The word, I hadn't used the word spirit work, that concept before in our work, was moral purpose, raise the bar, close the gap. And when Mark and I started to talk about it, he said there's something going on here that has to do with loving students, deep care, the human condition, and it's more than moral purpose. He said it's more profound than that. And so I started to look at it, and I saw our current work, although we didn't use the word spirit work, and I was somewhat hesitant because I didn't know how it would go. These 7 districts, the superintendents were not using that term, that word, that concept. And when we suggested it, spirit work, we said, this is kind of what we think you're doing. In a nanosecond, all 7 of them independently said, that's exactly what it is. It boosts me just even to hear the word because we love these kids. But to say you love kids, it doesn't have the kind of deep spiritual
Right.
phenomenon that really we're facing and up against. So we ran with it. And it's a great new concept. It's in all my new work. It's the impact of this deeper sense of humanity with strategies to do something about it.
And will this ultimately lead to more personalization of learning, which we've talked about for many decades, and deeper learning, as another book that you've written, to use your jargon?
Yeah, it does lead to that because in our newest work, as we part of the spirit work is the I'll say the collectivity. So this isn't individual people going about their spirit work. It includes that, but it also is the way in which students want to work with other people. And so the collaboration part was an essential part of this definition. And people do want to team up and work together. They do want to make an impact on their own lives, but mostly now we see students, for example, they want to make an impact on other people with other people. The world needs them, they know. And so that just blossomed out into that just in a flash, really.
Well, it's not unlike the trend around the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and that factor in the environment, and communication, collaboration, dealing with some of the most pressing issues that we face around the globe. To your point, it's real purposeful learning that helps them make an impact. And we're seeing that with so many startups in education that are emerging. It's not like, as baby boomers, we were looking for a job back in the day. Now it's purposeful, to your point.
It
Does
is
that make sense?
exactly that. And that's been brewing for the sustainability goals have been brewing for probably a decade. And they really weren't catching on. They were people will acknowledge them. Yes, we should do something about them, but they have to catch on at the individual spiritual level, the student, the teacher, the community. If they don't get taken up there, they have no basis. And so this is the difference between 3 years ago and now, or 5 years ago and now, is these are concrete actions that students and teachers in community and ourselves in our deep learning gravitate to really quickly, and it's grounded. How to make it present on a big basis, we can talk about that, but we are going from the isolated example that was here and there for the last decade to the system engaged in doing that. And I think there's a real chance in the next 3 years, 5 years, that we will have system presence. That is, whole systems doing this.
And we're starting to see that. And you've got a great example in where we're going to co-host our conference next year, and honored to have you speaking at it in Ottawa Catholic, in the nation's capital. They've been on this journey for a number of years. It doesn't happen overnight.
Right. And we teamed up with them, I think in 2014, 2015, that that they were already a good district in the province of Ontario in terms of literacy, numeracy, high school graduation, all of that. But they had a special interest in saying, this isn't good enough yet. We've got to go more. And we had our deep learning framework that we developed with school systems in about 10 different countries, where we had a new purpose for education that's compatible with spirit work. We had the 6 C's, the global competencies. We had the pedagogies to implement them. We had the linkage to development outside the school. So we had all of that. And what they did was they said, this is the route. And we're going to, like good change agents, we're not going to holus bolus say all 83 schools are doing it next month. So they started with 7 schools in year one. They added 8 schools more in year two. That's only 12 months later. That's 15. Then they went to all 83. And this was 2016, 2017. And then they just kept going. And we have been working with them. And they have become stronger during the pandemic in this work. We can talk about why that is the case, but they are a very good example of system-wide, built-in, continuous improvement to go deeper and deeper. And almost anybody that you could tap on the shoulder in Ottawa Catholic, a student, a teacher, a parent, can tell you that is happening.
Fascinating times. And, getting beyond those pockets of innovation, you talk about innovation in the book, and that the definition of innovation people misconstrue is being tech focused. It's not necessarily tech focused. It's taking a concept and making an improvement on it, making it better, if you will. Um, However, if I could just share a colleague from your past university days at U of T, where you attended and were dean, Dr. Steve Jordan's, the U of T psychologist who has his own EdTech startup around assessment, talked about the threat of the great snapback during COVID with the mass innovation that occurred, with the threat of teachers wanting to revert back to the path of least resistance. Um, what are your thoughts on that? What are you seeing?
I want to, Robert, step back for a moment to put it in
Sure,
perspective and really quite grounded, but then I'm going to directly answer your question.
sure.
There's a famous study, a book by uh, Godin and Katz, I think are their names. And they had a book 2008 called The Race Between Technology and Education. And they focused on US data. And what they showed was from after the war, the Second World War, 1948 or so to 1978, education outstripped technology. That is, more people are graduating, they're getting jobs, the equity gap was going down. And then, for a variety of reasons, from 1978 to the present, it reversed. Not so much just because technology went wild, which it did, but because education didn't keep up. It stayed stuck. And
Hmm.
so they got this really big imbalance. And I'm quite aware of that study. And now I'm aware that this is a new race between technology and learning or education. And I see just in the last 2 or 3 years now, I used to think, you saw me talk about education is not, or technology is not a driver, it's at best an accelerator.
Right.
Now I'm going to say that education, partly because it hasn't developed as much, we can talk about that, but technology through artificial intelligence, other things, has developed. It's powerful and it's dangerous, but it's also can be hugely leveraged. And so now we are thinking that in the latest book, the new one I'm doing, I call it teaming with technology. So think of the word team. So now we have education back in the driver's seat in
Hmm.
Ottawa Catholic, and have not shying away from and wary of technology, but saying we have to make this a proactive friend. How do we do that? And that's what,
Right.
if you don't have your act together, what I call teaming with a focus, you
Right.
will you will be overrun by technology. You won't know what to do. But if you do have your act together, you can run really farther than we've ever done before.
Well said. And we're currently finishing off a reno in our home, and having taken CompTech courses back in the day in the TDSB, I'm doing some of my own work. So I have a toolbox. It's about using the right tool at the right time. It's not
Hmm.
about technology all the time, and that's something that I try to emphasize. And I don't think we've really optimized the power and potential, particularly around, you know, AI and assessments and streamlining the process to give teachers back time.
Yeah, I think it's with this I want to go again. It
Right,
requires educators to be good enough to be the proactive partner in that relationship. And there's worry about that because AI has developed on its own, even though people are behind it,
right.
it's not it's almost alive in its own right. And I follow Meredith Broussard, her name is, and she wrote a book 2 years ago called Artificial Unintelligence, which
Oh, interesting.
she's an insider. She's an analyst, computer
Okay.
analyst, and now she has a new book. I'm dying to get my hands on it. It'll be out in February, called More Than a Glitch. And I read this as an insider. So she's saying here's technology getting phenomenally powerful, but when it can do when it goes wrong, it's not because somebody's deliberately making it do wrong. It just is so powerful it can go wrong if we're not trying to shape it. And that's what I mean by the teaming. We've got to shape it and think of it as a friend in reference to the spirit work, and then it's going
Right.
to be unstoppable.
I like that philosophy as becoming a friend of the process and not being the central focus and
Right. Yeah.
transparency. So I've long said it takes a digital village to raise a child in the 21st century, as you illustrate in community, collaboration, well-being, to name a few key elements. What's holding systems back? Role? What's the role of faculties of education along this journey and paradigm that you talk about? Because you were there. You know what
Mhm.
the complexities are. They don't all collaborate. They don't all behave in the same manner. That's all over the map. And if we use Canada as an example, education is a provincial jurisdiction. Do we need to do? Should we be collaborating more? Do we need a national focus? I know there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I think we have to start with the question of what has the pandemic done to us in that relationship? Has it made it more possible to do greater things, or is it going to put us on the defensive? And we'd need like three programs to get into that. But I want to be
This could be a
succinct
whole
in
series.
saying, yeah, I want to be succinct in saying it can go either way. There's no other way of putting it. And what the problem was already there, but what the pandemic did is it exposed even greater the flaws of the current education system. And it also showed some of the possibilities that were there. But because it's overwhelmed us, because people are literally burnt out now and struggling with against enormous odds, is this temporary? And how do you get out of the temporary if it's that desperate? A lot of people are leaving the profession. We wrote a op-ed called "Who's Abandoning Whom?" But I also wrote another op-ed on 6 reasons to be optimistic about learning in 2022 and onward. And one of those
Right.
reasons was finding better allies. And in it, I argued that students and teachers are each other's best allies. And then it's parents. And then it's school principals. My new book on the school principals shows this. And therefore, the way out of this is to, and I just say it succinctly, build the base. Some
Hmm.
people call it the bottom. Mobilize the middle, the Ottawa Catholics. And the only word I can think of for the top is intrigue the top. The top can no longer manage these systems as we did when I was with McGinty. It was manageable. We had continuity of leadership. Now we don't have continuity of leadership at the top, nor is it manageable. It's too complex. You can't manage it this complex because it's got to be specific and coherent. It's got to appeal to the hearts and minds of people in the system. So it's got to be accessible, and you can't make it accessible downward. You have to make it accessible upward. And that's what Ottawa has done so far, up to the middle. And that's what our work is right now for the future, is to do this. I think we're really reeling now, but I hope within the next 6 months there'll be a shaking off of that. Is a danger. We could go back to this simple agenda and use technology and privatize education. A danger, but it will not produce the kind of humans we need to survive. Climate change, social distrust, our humanity, our being will be decimated in the next 10 years if education is not turned into a route for fulfillment of individuals and groups and the global entity. I can see it, I can taste it. It's going to be a tough battle, but I think there are a lot of people are up for it, especially the young. Anybody from 3 years of age and upward, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, so insightful and inspiring, Dr. Fullan. You clearly embrace the growth mindset and hope for the future. Is the growth mindset a skill that should be taught in education? Is it a skill and should it be taught?
Not per se. I mean, I don't. The growth mindset and SEL, all those things. They're part of it, but they're not the main point. You can't take one tool, and say, okay, we're going to change the system. It is a mindset, but the mindset basically is what is learning. Our new approach to learning is it's about improving humanity and the human condition. It's about learning the competencies. These competencies are tantamount to a growth mindset. They're tantamount to solving difficult problems and creating innovation. So you can mainline what has to be done. If you start picking out ad hoc elements and say, oh, we better do the growth mindset, then it's just too piecemeal. It's not. It's just going to be clumpy steps to the future that will never break through into the system. So I want to tackle the system directly. Lots of people do want to do that. I'm talking about teachers, students, parents, communities, and even some administrators. So I think we have a chance if we can get the focus, because people want it. They just need to be part of a group that's mobilizing to make it happen.
You talk about emotion, and you're so passionate about this. That's what evokes change. You have to appeal to people's emotions. We're not excellent at doing that, generally speaking, in education. We kind of treat the kids the same. You refer to the egg carton classroom in the book,
Yeah.
with the teacher at the front of the class. We need to get away from that. I mean, our classroom of the future here, our work and learning space here at the Mindshare Workspace, mimics the future classroom. It's about different spaces, agility, and not a fixed mindset.
Yeah, I think it's if you look at motivation for change, which is something that I work a lot on, and we certainly have arrived at the point that the people with the problem have to be part of developing the solution. We call it joint determination, and so there's those issues. But you can't go into education right now. Just look at Ontario and not find emotion. You better be good at contending with emotion and turning it to our advantage. So this is I'm in my book. I have a great quote from one of the schools in England that turned around, and I wanted to probe what they did with the community, because it was a very difficult community. It had been in the low ranks for a dozen years. They turned it around with 2 years, and when I interviewed the people leading it, one of them said, leaders make a mistake when they go into these communities, this high poverty community, and they try to be aspirational rather than relational. That's a phenomenal insight from a practitioner.
Amazing.
That is that jumps out at you. I hope it jumps out at it does me. And
Yeah,
what it basically says is relational is the emotional part of getting started, and aspirational is what you do with that energy that comes from that emotional clink, or link. So we've got to realize, and I'm an academic, so I've had to work hard at getting the emotional side of me, instead of just the rational side. But
right.
there's no doubt, everybody knows this now, real change is about emotion. Negative change is about emotion. Positive change is about emotion. But you better have something to do that works, that has an impact, which further motivates the emotion of people to want to do more. So it's touch and go, precarious. We better have the right approach for the next 12 months, or we'll lose everything.
Well, I'm excited to see this focus of spirit work perhaps have an impact on Ontario, as an example, its education system, and see where that might go, given the, as you alluded to, mass emotion right now happening, and channeling that to look at it from a win-win partnership perspective.
I think that is the challenge. And I would have to say that this government hasn't shown much interest in what I'll call social policy, the policies and the actions that we talk about, so that you can do good things. So it's not like good things are being prevented. But this strike we have now potentially on, and the concerns about it, they're about having, and of course, union members want to expand union members. We know that. But the agenda is to mobilize now the students, the teachers, the community, the government, the focus on early learning, to build the learning that students can't get enough of. They want to do more and more learning. And that's what I think the real fight is about. It's not about having more money or more union members. It's about changing the nature of learning in schools on a large scale basis. Yes, Ottawa did it with 83 schools, but we've got 4,900 schools. How do we do it with 72 districts? How do we move and multiply? And I wish the government would recognize that they could be a partner in co-leading this.
With that, Dr. Fullan, thank you so much for your insight and inspiration and the challenge that you've just issued out there. Some amazing potential for us in the future. You give us hope, and looking forward to your next book that will be coming later this year. And what is that one called that focuses on?
It's called the Principle 2.0 because it was a second edition, but it turned out to be a new book. So Principle 2.0.
Outstanding. In the meantime, do check out Dr. Fullan's website and michaelfullan.ca to acquire his latest book, Spirit Work, and others that he's produced over the years. And this includes this edition of Mindshare TV. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.
Thank you, Robert.